And we are live. This is Dumb the Wiser. My name is JP Berg. We have Peyman Askari, my great friend, joining us today. How you doing, Peyman?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little tired, but
You're busy,
that's part.
man.
Yeah.
So what do you think of the climate change lockdowns in Nova Scotia?
Things are just getting out of control. Like the lines they've been drawn, and people are picking a side. And I've noticed there's been a massive increase in liberals or liberal bots trying to agitate people who oppose the lockdowns.
Always, man. I call them regime apologist bots. You could tell on X they seem to have like a vague sports reference. I think it's to lend credence to the optics of it being a real account. But if you check the replies, every single response they've made is apologetics for the regime, or whatever the government narrative of the day is. But it's
Yeah,
very synthetic.
there's definitely a pattern. They only have a couple of hundred followers. Usually the account was created like 10 years ago, but
Mhm.
there's no activity.
Yep.
Sometimes they don't have a profile picture and they always mention Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the funny thing is I noticed those bots right away, but I didn't notice the bots that agree with me. There's bots on the other side of these issues too, and they'll pump you up, and it's still the same tells. You could still essentially see that they're bot accounts, or at least you suspect that. You can never know.
You know, my rule now is if the person hasn't been on my podcast, I don't really trust them.
Yeah, that's a good rule, man. It really is because it's never been more convoluted, never been more varying interests, being disingenuous and kind of representing their own people that pay them. It's really hard. It's hard to get stable ground to stand on conceptually to actually determine what's going on. But with these climate change lockdowns, I'm watching mass formation occur again. It's the same fracturing we've seen during the pandemic. You got the people that are pro narrative. They've responded to the stimuli, the threat. There's this visceral, tangible threat, and that's an uncontrolled wildfire. And then so they become hyper susceptible to the remedy for that threat, which is always provided. It's problem, reaction, solution. But what this does is it's setting, I think, the first in the Western world. I'm saying climate change lockdowns. That's not entirely accurate, but it's a climate change restriction. Nova Scotia, for instance, is over 60% wooded area. And we're not allowed in the woods for any reason whatsoever. You're just not allowed in there. It sets a very dangerous precedence, and it gives them power to do this at their whim whenever they determine it's good enough. There's no legislative apparatus to kind of keep them accountable on it. It's petrifying.
You're absolutely right, JP. They are using the same playbook they used during COVID. I guess they perfected it. Like whatever they learned during COVID, they used in the last election. You know, with the elbows up thing.
Yep.
But this is more like it's almost perfectly the same strategy that they use, like you mentioned. Like it's a threat, and the threat makes for a very good argument that the left just they they start repeating. If you look at it, it kind of makes sense. There's this massive forest fire that's raging, and it could kill everybody. All we have to do is stay out of the forest, and everyone will be fine. It's very difficult to counter that.
Well. It's a disingenuous argument from the get go because they're making an argument for the provincial fire bans, which we've had in Nova Scotia. Dry summers happen, we have a fire ban. That's reasonable. But to then ban entry under the premise of, well, we don't trust people to abide by the fire ban. It's like, well, on some level, you have to trust me, sir. I'm a tax-paying, law-abiding citizen. We can't like collectively punish everyone preemptively in a preventative regard. It's nuts. There's never been a precedence for it except for COVID. And it's the same arguments. Like people call me like, oh, you're just a moron. And these are real people. Some of them are not bots. Some of them are followers of mine. Like the mass formation too, it split different this time. There's people on both sides of this that just fell for the stimuli. It's like, you're an idiot. It's dry. It's never been this dry. So you start telling Canadians about like how unprecedented and how tyrannical that these restrictions are. And they'll look at you with a sincere look in their face and they'll say, but it's really dry, man. You know what I mean? Totally fucking oblivious to the fact that like, no, there's no reasoning for something this far because it gives them too much power.
Yeah,
Yeah,
again,
again.
you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And I've had people that supported me on other like geopolitical issues, and they're saying this the same thing. Like, Payment, are you a firefighter? You don't know. Like, all you have to do is stay out of the forest for a few weeks, Peyman, have you lost your house during a fire? What do you know? And I think we're missing. There's something here bigger that we must be missing, and it's probably the draconian nature of these fines, like $25,000. I always ask the question. I'm like, well, how did we deal with this stuff 50 years ago when we didn't have these fines? Did we not have forest fires, or were there forest fires just raging on everywhere because everybody was arrogant and refused to implement $25,000 fines?
I think it's entirely bullshit. We have there's lots of data on forest fires and frequency. Um, but it's all just the argument's flawed, right? Like by its very nature. It's like you can use analogies. You see a lot of people using cars. It's like we have vehicles. We understand that there's risks. There's inherent risks involved in operating a motor vehicle. But we have licenses. We have a system in place. And I mean, the premise of this is to say, well, look, there's going to be people that are not going to abide by the rules that we have in place. So our answer for this is to just restrict driving entirely, which is phenomenal. It's like that's the logic. And then you get the same guilt thing. Like you said, have you lost your home in a fire? You know what I mean? Are you a firefighter? It's like, are you an epidemiologist? Did you lose your grandmother to COVID? It's the same thing. And they don't see it. They're like totally oblivious to this. And it's scary, man. I'm like one of the, I think many people that I felt like I was in an episode of The Outer Limits or Black Mirror during COVID. Like everyone's crazy except for me and a few people, right? But most people are like, they're kind of responding to the stimuli. And I'm just having that same thing all over again. Like for me, it's very cut and dry. It's like these restrictions are very much an overreach, an unprecedented one, and it sets a dangerous precedent. So I'm like, this is crazy. And I'm encountering people. And that's what I get. They look at me dead face. They just dead face me and say, like, it's really dry, man. And I don't know how to respond to that. I feel like I'm in a bad dream and it's happening again, right?
I got the same argument from people. They said anybody who refuses, who opposes this ban on hikers is like the same people that refuse to put on a seatbelt, refuse to put on a helmet. And here I'm thinking, I'm like, well, if you don't want to wear a seatbelt, I don't see why. Don't wear a seatbelt. If you don't want to wear a helmet on a motorcycle, don't wear a helmet. I'm okay with that. But
You
but,
should
but I,
be
I,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say the way things are going. Um, if we allow this to happen, what's going to happen in 50 years? I mean,
100%. There's a trajectory, right? So it's like did you ever hear the old saying, like, you teach people how to treat you? It's like the reciprocal dynamic between a people and a government. Like if we take it, they will keep giving it to us. And if we eat this, that tells them conclusively that we will eat anything. Because this is I need another adjective besides unprecedented, but it's phenomenal. Unprecedented is appropriate relative to the fact that what the most dangerous aspect of this is not isolated. This sets a precedence. And it's all attached to the whole narrative about climate change, the sensationalization of this, that being utilized as a precursor towards these technocratic type restrictions. But I watched Tim Houston. Now I know other provinces. I think as far as it goes, it's Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Susan Holt in New Brunswick kind of copied our conservative Tim Houston here in Nova Scotia. But it's like the premise for it is just so bad. And I think that's why our side responds, because you're seeing these people that are just oblivious to how dangerous it is to let the government have this authority, and they're just seeing the fear. It's like that fear response is the biggest one, and then they attribute it to your stupidity or ignorance. So it just creates that rift, and it's happening again, man.
I think there's two elements to this. The first one is climate change, like the climate lockdowns, or as you're calling them, the climate restrictions,
Mm.
which I don't really understand because climate change, the narrative is kind of dying. People are
Yeah.
getting fed up with it. The other thing, and I think this is this is what they were really trying to test, is how far can they push things? Because $25,000. When I heard that, I'm like, why didn't they just make it a $200 ticket? Like $200 for most people. There's no difference between 200 and 25,000. Like people have no money anyway in Canada, so
Mhm.
I think they're trying to they're trying to push the envelope. Which actually, there's a third thing, which I think the reason that they're doing this is there's probably something big coming. It might be Agenda 2030. It might be the 2026 midterms. It might be the fact that Europe is on the verge of economic collapse. and
Mhm.
Carney is obviously in the European camp. So I think those things are connected.
Yeah, it could be many things at once. And one thing's for sure, they're definitely accruing data relative to this. Just like they did during COVID, they were gathering data. They want to see how compliant or subservient the population will be. And Nova Scotia, when you think about it, it's a good test ground. And we're also going to be the first people in Canada that are going to have a digital ID when our digital health cards roll out. I'm still not sure on the date on this, but it's been announced. I've received emails regarding it. So, I mean, it's like whatever they're doing, they're testing kind of in a microcosm of a small province. Nova Scotia has slightly more than 1 million people. And I mean, it's kind of gives you a good idea to gauge the overall response and spare it from having to test this in a high, like a population dense province where the reaction is going to be more severe, potentially, if it is.
Yeah. One thing that struck me when this happened was I asked myself, how come they didn't roll this out in British Columbia? Because usually we're the test bed for all this stuff. It might be, as you mentioned, your population's lower, easier to control. And this is where I have to kind of profess my ignorance. It might be because you guys are actually having forest fires over there, which I'm not following. So that could be another. They might have just said, you know what? Why don't we use this emergency to roll out our tyranny?
And that's it. These people, when you give a government the ability to not follow the rules anytime there's an emergency, they're going to start interpreting everything as an emergency. So everyone's seen this dynamic with the whole premise of the COVID lockdowns, and they kind of like there's a lot of people that predicted this. Tons of people really were talking about wait until the climate change lockdowns come. And even during COVID, that sounded sensational. But that's like the way we're going. It's kind of like a process where you're just slowly waking up. Oh, they would never do that. And then it's like, oh, well, they would do that. They would do worse than that. And everyone's kind of having this awakening, but it's not occurring fast enough. And providing this too, it now gives us another reason to divide. So it creates the chaos, it creates the conflict. And instead of us saying like, looking at this practically or pragmatically in a utilitarian way, like how could we mitigate this? Like, because it seems to me it's pretty fucking obvious. You do some forest management, and then you maybe get some water bombers if we weren't sending all our money to fund foreign war machines. Like, I mean, that's what you would do, but they're spending their money on that. In addition, they're spending their money on propagandizing us. What could we have bought in the realm of firefighting equipment for the CBC budget or all the other state subsidized swill merchants? It's kind of offensive.
That's a I see. I look at the memes that come up. I go on Instagram a lot, and the right they started pushing that meme as well, where if we hadn't funded the CBC, we could have bought this many airplanes. And I can just see somebody on the left just getting so angry. They're like, "Oh, these damn fascists on the right, they don't have a brain." And then they go even further to the left. And so they're creating this division again. And I don't know how to. I don't want to fall into the same trap that we fell into during COVID.
That's like me, and I am. It's like I've explained this before with the mass formation. There's the people, there's the kind of the fraction or the segment of the population that falls for the stimuli, the point of fear, and then they react to that. But us, we have to react to them because they become like absolutely fanatical about it. They're inconsolable, and then they get agitated. And what I noticed straight away with this, and I instantly got vibes of the COVID thing, was the visceral hatred these people have. Like, just because I'm like, hey man, if I was on the other side of this, I don't think I'd have the proclivity to hate someone that had a difference of opinion, but they hate me. So it's just like in the mass formation with COVID, they see me as a threat to their narrative. They're deriving security from their narrative. So me, by questioning it publicly, I'm a threat and I'm a moron, or however they create you as being in the out group, and they put you in the out group, and then they dehumanize you or admonish you with the typical rhetoric. And it's like, I fucking fell right into it again, man. I'm on there fighting with them. Like, I should just ignore them. I should say what I want to say and kind of put an emphasis on this process. Because Matthias Desmet, who really he released The Psychology of Totalitarianism during COVID, kind of towards the end of it. He says, like, the one thing you could do to mitigate our proclivity as a mass for adhering to these and becoming susceptible to these narratives is to constantly talk about the processes. This is how it happens. So instead of perceiving yourself as an individual within this, you perceive yourself as a node involved in a complex system. And he uses a lot of analogies, the Sierpinski triangle, where if you follow the certain guidelines and everyone was to walk in a room and follow these guidelines and they make a little mark on the paper, overall there would be a larger pattern that would emerge. And that's kind of the mass formation. And for Matthias Desmond, like, I think a lot of these things, they do have driving forces. I think there is groups of elitists that realize that humanity has this proclivity to this mass formation phenomena, and I think they stimulate them. That's what I think they're accruing data relative to. I think that's every bit of data they get is going to be probably ran through their AI models, so they can then kind of reinterpret or refine the process for our conditioning, which is terrifying.
If you want to talk about solutions this time, because I don't want to be on the back foot again, like with COVID, let's start with the first one, which would be what Mr. Jeff Evely did. I thought it was masterful. I went back and I watched this video when he went in and he said, I'm going to go in the force there. And the guy's like, if you go, I'll give you a ticket. He goes, I want a ticket. Because last time I went to court, I got to trial and the judge said I had no standing because I didn't actually get a ticket. So this time you're going to give me a ticket and I'm going to take it to trial. Like that is amazing, because he's being polite, professional. He's got a plan, and he's saying to everyone else in Canada, like, follow my lead, come up with a plan, and execute that plan. Let's not run around in circles like we did during COVID.
That's right. And get kind of caught into the just arguing about it and not taking pragmatic steps. He also references asserting one's rights, and rights in a government system where they're taking them. And it's very ambiguous where our rights are in Canada. We know that they're kind of more state sanctioned privileges in the sense that they could be revoked whenever the government deems fit. They could just take your rights. So they're not really rights, they're privileges. And when they're there, sure, it's just as good as anyone with rights. But like when they're removed, I mean, it's the same. But he's using this phrase, one has to assert their rights. And they do. And his public assertion, I mean, I'm very grateful that it's garnered the attention that it deserves, because he was on the front page of the New York Post, Jeff Evely. Like, I know Jeff from X, but my wife knows him personally. She grew up with his little sister. So there's an actual connection there. And it's just wild to see how successful this was. And I'm very proud of him, man. I think we all should. But here's a flip side. Now, I have a Facebook account. I keep it very small. I don't speak about political issues on it, but I have a large group of people from Cape Breton, where Jeff Evely and I are both from. And the response locally to Jeff Evely's action is absolutely visceral hatred. And they're all on there just trashing him. And then nationally, the guy's a hero. He's standing against this. And it's just obvious, like, but that just goes to show you how bad this is. Here he is, a local man from there. Oh, he's that nut job that ran for the PPC, and all sentiments like this, trivializing him as an individual and trivializing what he's attempting to do here. And it just, again, man, I won't let it demoralize me, but I just have to shake my head because it's sad. It's tragic even. Like, this is how divided we are. We can't see past our own hatred. And once we see someone as part of an out group, then that dynamic fits in, that tribalism kicks in, and we're kind of fucked.
Maybe the reason that you're observing that is the closer you are to these forest fires, and again, I don't know how big they are, where they are, but you're more likely to say to your government, all right, man, just do whatever you got to do. Just make sure that my big screen TV doesn't get burnt down. And they're okay with it. Whereas we're a little bit safer here in British Columbia. We're like, no, keep it on the island. First of all, like, that's the most important thing right now. As a British Columbia, make sure that doesn't leave the maritime provinces. That's my number one goal.
And that's what's kind of scary about it. It's the preemptive regard of it, because that argument is valid. And it is valid, but it's valid relative to a fire ban. So we're having dry conditions, no smoking in the woods, and a fire ban. And then they say, well, people aren't going to abide by that. Any law, there's going to be people that are going to deviate from it. That's just the nature of laws. That's why you have a repercussion for said law. It's just like I say, any rule that doesn't have a reprimand attached to it, it's a suggestion. It's not a rule unless there's a reprimand of some regard. So it's not the premise of that argument that I have a problem with. It's the fallacious extension of it. So now it's like I say, instead of saying, well, there's a fire ban, and there's a smoking ban, you can't do neither of these things. They're just going to broadly ban the whole thing. And I mean, I get why people are afraid about it. And I understand that some people may have lost a home in fires in the past, but I still don't fall into that logical fallacy of thinking their opinion is then more important, right? And that's what you do. They're trying to appeal to your emotions. It's just like COVID. It's like, I lost a grandmother to COVID. How dare you not wear your mask? And we all heard that stuff, man. Halfway to, like you don't even necessarily think it's true. You just think they're using that as a rhetorical tactic to kind of win the argument.
You know, I go back to the seatbelt thing. The reason that I don't support these seatbelt law, I always put my seatbelt on. It's the first thing I do. I get in the car, but you don't have to make it a law. And what I think, my view, what I think has happened is there's no more trust in society. Like, trust comes from the family unit, your parents, specifically your mom and dad, your parents. They tell you, like, this is right, this is wrong. They tell you, don't start a fire in the forest, don't smoke in the forest in the summer. And society trusts one another. Every once in a while, when things get really out of control, you put a sign, say, don't smoke in the forest, don't start a fire in the forest. But now the family unit's been broken up. All that decision making has been transferred to the government. So in a way, it actually makes sense that for them to come in and say, all right, we have a nation of irresponsible citizens, and we're going to need punitive laws to make sure that they don't do stupid things, and including hiking in the forest at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that entirely. I will I'll riff off of it and add to it a little bit. I also think there's something to be said about a homogenous society. Not to get into any racialism, but like Canada, even with our immigration, we had a point system. Like, people would come into Canada at a pace where they really could adapt and kind of adopt our culture and even add to it in small ways. Like, I think they've created a false dichotomy. You're either like pro white Canada, or you're like some multicultural leftist or something. And I think the truth kind of lies more in the middle of that. But it's relative to them kind of adhering and adopting our customs, and then they become Canadians. So when you live in a country full of Canadians, there is more of a trust there, just in that, not just relative to the family unit, relative to that kind of the broader community. But what's happened in Canada now with the weaponized mass migration is it's literally balkanized our electorate. We have like not just incongruous cultures with Canadian values, they're incongruous with one another. And when you get into the population dense zones, into the municipalities and the cities, the bigger ones, you'll have a very powerful Muslim community. You'll have a very powerful African community. You'll have a very powerful Filipino community. So you've balkanized and you've factionalized the electorate. So I think naturally with that too, you're more skeptical of each other in these different communities. And they want that overarching government to provide kind of the mediation for it.
So two things. First of all, you're right. And a perfect example is, look at garbage, like littering. My home country, for example, Iran, littering is more socially acceptable. When we got to Germany, that was the first thing my parents told me, like, whatever you do, don't litter here. They'll throw you in jail. The other thing is, you mentioned the urban centers. Immigration works better in an urban setting where, everything is controlled. Your food supply, you have law enforcement. I don't know. You got towers and people know where to go, and roads. There's no real chance for a forest fire. There's no real chance for littering. Like, there's garbage bins everywhere. They're trying to graft that urban model onto the rural areas, onto the countrysides, onto our national parks. And I mean, if this is allowed to continue, it's not going to stop with just hiking bans. They're going to say, we need to wall off these forests. We can't trust people to, put barbed wire on it so they can't climb and scale the fence.
That's what people seem to be lacking the imagination for regarding this. And it's because they're kind of blinded by the threat. And that's your classic mass formation. They're so afraid of this threat, and they've bought the narrative that they've identified with it. So it's not even just that. When you're encountering these people and you're trying to have a discourse, which you probably really shouldn't, you right away, you get their egos. Like I always say, you're not like a true conversation. And I like to have a conversation, and I'll have a stance on something. You can have a totally different stance, and we can explore the issue together. We could even have decorum while doing so. But that's not what you're seeing with this. You're seeing animus right away and ego right away. You're a dummy. I had so many low resolution Canadians call me a dummy. I don't get into intellect and IQ and that, but like it's like I'm a dummy because I can kind of see how this could potentially be a bad thing for the government to have this power. Like that's directly correlated to my aptitude or my intelligence. It's just ludicrous, but that's what you're getting, and it's because they've attached their ego to it. It's just so complicated, man. It's like I say, how do we stop this? And again, I go back to Matthias Desmond. We have to explain to people the mechanism, because a lot of people have a harder time acknowledging the conceptual framework of things. And for this specific phenomena, the mass formation, there really is a lot of good data and literature that kind of explains it.
So again, let's go back to solutions. Another solution I had is people need to get a hold of the institutions that claim to be conservative and make this an important issue. So Daniel Smith in Alberta and the Alberta Prosperity Project, I would lean on them and say, listen, if you want my support, you will talk about this and you will take my position, not some wishy-washy center of the road position.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do the yeah.
It's got to be a very, very broad pushback for this, because nothing's going to work. You can't go in the middle with it. There's no ground to stand on with this. And what they do is they got everyone distracted to they start making arguments for the fire ban. And it's like, I agree with the fire ban. I do. I'm a reasonable person. I don't want the fucking forest to blow up. I'm not that much of a libertarian. I'm not like, let's just risk it. It's like, no, I'm fine with logical measures, logical preventative measures. I'm even okay. I don't like it, but I'm even okay with monetary fines as a result. Like I say, a rule without a reprimand is kind of a suggestion. And I do think it's dangerous enough to merit that kind of a response. But what's not is to just total ban, just to broadly ban people. And it comes down to trust, like we've been saying. But as a solution, like we have to organize. And everyone's afraid to start organizing because they're going to throw the kitchen sink at you. The reason it's a $25,000 fine is because they want a massive disincentive. They want to scare the shit out of the population. It's absolutely tyrannizing us in the classic ways they do. And here's something else we didn't really mention. In Nova Scotia right away, they set up a rat line, a snitch line. So, I mean, they're fueling this mass formation. And that's, like I say, I really think that one of the main premises is to keep us divided and to keep us in these tribes. Because as long as we're in these tribes, we won't realize that, okay, they're kind of fucking us all over here. We have more in common with each other despite our ideological differences. Your working class leftist and your working class right-leaning individual, you still have more in common with each other than the government that is in the process of transitioning our economy into something very different, something very draconian, very Marxist.
Yeah, going back to what I said about solutions, like leaning on Daniel Smith, if we could tie it to somehow our culture and say, to be a Canadian means to have a connection with the land of Canada. And I'm not saying constitutional amendments easy to do, but say, our vision is to have the word forest in our constitution and to explicitly say no government can restrict the access of citizens of this land from enjoying or mobility rights within the forest, something like that, to put this government on notice.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there should be all kinds of amendments. I think I'd like to see our 1982 Constitution, the Charter rights, revoked, and I'd like to see it reconsidered and resubstantiated with like real dialogue and input from the public. But I mean, that's a pipe dream. That's not going to happen in this current climate. But I mean, what could happen is, like you say, putting pressure on people. Here's someone else I'm going to have to mention, Mr. Polyev, who is apparently the leader of the official opposition in Canada. He's a conservative. He calls himself conservative, and he's not mentioned anything, at least to my knowledge. Now, today I haven't checked, but he hasn't yet acknowledged how repressive and wrong this is. He hasn't mentioned it, which is concerning.
I don't think he'll mention it. They probably went to him, his PR team. They're like, listen, this is like a live hand grenade. If you come out and you say people have the right to go in a forest and some old lady's house burns down, like the CBC is going to have a news team there 24/7. And every time the woman cries, they're going to put it on, I don't know, CBC News will put it on NX, so he won't do it.
And you hear a lot of the conspiracy theories that they're actually people that are starting these fires, and then they're utilizing the threat they're causing as a kind of a rationale for more measures. But I mean, let's forget about that. That's very sensational. I'm not dispelling that or dismissing it. Maybe. But one thing that's undeniable is that other countries with large forested areas, especially ones in proximity to cities, they have a forest management process. They have like workers that'll have a burn line around cities. They actually clear a lot of the dead brush out, especially with national parks. When you look at Jasper and the massive fire we had there, I heard a lot of people that are familiar with this type of work say like that was a tinderbox. They're almost kind of setting these things up for a calamity. So, I mean, even if you're not going to go all the way and commit to the fact, oh, the government's lighting the fires themselves, it's like, well, clearly they're creating optimal conditions for these things to occur. However they do, if it's sparked by a cigarette butt or if it's a lightning strike, I mean, the conditions are bad for it. You have quite literally a tinderbox situation.
Yeah, depending on where you live, you have to spend money and resources on making that place livable. If you live somewhere close to the desert, you're going to get a lot of sand. You got to constantly clean up the sand, and you got to constantly change your air filtration system. If you live in somewhere with snow, you got to pour ice, and you got to shovel the snow. If you live by a forest, and I think we've forgotten this, like forest fires are a real thing. They have been a thing from time immemorial. You will have to either maintain that or you will lose everything you have. And that's the part that no one's talking about. Forest fires don't just happen because of climate change. They've been happening for hundreds of years on this continent.
And we all know from Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent them. But what the bear didn't say is don't go in the woods. He was kind of a nature advocate as much as I remember. But yeah, another point on the point you made is like there's things we could do to mitigate the potentiality by forest management. And then there's like having like tons of firefighting gear, especially in population dense areas. Like, I don't know, man. I pay 42% of my income, 42% of my labor goes to this government. And I mean, I don't get any great services. The healthcare, I don't have a GP. I have to go to walk-ins. There's no follow-up with anything healthcare related. My rents are it's like it's risen. We've been over this. I won't rehash it all. But I mean, at the very least, you think that we would have services for fighting fires. Like I said, it's when you look at the misallocation of funds, I can't think it's incompetent. It's an agenda. We're in that managed decline I referenced before. You can't be that fucking stupid as what we're doing with our money. That's just where I come to it logically.
Yeah, I was talking to this orthodontist yesterday, and she was talking, and she's in BC, and she's talking about how like she can't work in this climate anymore because taxes are too high. And she said taxes are high because they have to fund this bureaucracy, but they have to fund this bureaucracy because taxes are so high that you can't work in private industry. So you'd have unemployment. So we've entered this like negative feedback loop,
Yes.
which I don't know how we break out from this. If you don't give your 42%, then what are they going to do with all that 20% of the GDP of bureaucrats who have no skills whatsoever? They have like a basket weaving degree.
Yeah, it's in my estimation, it's a calamity waiting to happen, and they're trying everything to kind of ease this from occurring or prolong it. And that's why it's all kind of lining up with with what you read about the 2030 agenda and like the reset. If you get into Carney's book, I've read several thorough summaries of it. I mean, the premise of it is to transition our free market systems and economies over to what he calls human value based commodity systems. So, I mean, that's a very fancy way of kind of saying like it's definitely Marxist in some regard because it's human value based and equitable. You get all those words, and to the uninitiated, to people that haven't studied Marxism or the effects economically of it, that sounds not just benign, it sounds potentially really positive. You know what I mean? Yeah, human values based systems instead of these greedy capitalists. Yeah, right. Like you can see why it's appealing. But to anyone who's done a modicum of research regarding this, it's like, oh, I know what you mean by these words. Once you start hearing equity and human value systems and stuff, you know. And it's not that like it's not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just we know that's not what he means, right? That's the whole premise of it. Anthropogenic climate change, this concept of man-made climate change, provides them with a really good opportunity to for the commodification of carbon, and more importantly, the commodification of carbon output. So I think kind of what he's laying out in this is that we would all have an allocation of carbon credits. That's how I think he intends to achieve equity. Is everyone, instead of a universal basic income, we will get an allocation of carbon credits. Now, if we make enough money, we can keep our carbon credits and go on a vacation that year, or we can have barbecues. I don't know how exactly it will work. I'm kind of getting into hypothetical territory, but I think that's going to also kind of give him the whole premise of equity. So we'll have this almost neo-feudalistic society where the peasantry gets these carbon credits, which we then can trade up. We could sell them. And then the wealthy people in our communities, they won't have that reduction in quality of life. They will be able to maintain. Might cost them a bit more money, but I mean, that's kind of the commodification of carbon, and that's tied into the 15-minute cities and all that lore. It just seems like that's where we're going.
Let's work that one backwards. So you mentioned the carbon credit system. I think for the government, they don't care how they control people. They just want that control. So carbon credit, maybe that'll be the one. They've already, obviously banking is one of them. Social credit, that could be another one, right? So these are tools that they're using to achieve their goal, and the goal is control. But it goes back to what I said, the family unit. I don't even have a family myself, but like I grew up with a family, and back then in the 90s, families were more sovereign. So that's a decentralized form of governance. Mm-hmm. The mother and the father decide what the kid learns, decide what their morals are going to be, decide how much time they spend on the phone. They decide indirectly how much energy they consume because they have to pay for the gas and all that, the electricity. But now that we're moving to a centralized form of government where the government's making those decisions with those tools we mentioned, carbon credit, banking, social credit, and we're calling it control. But I think by not having that conversation, it's very easy to dupe the youth. Because they're like, oh, climate change. Oh, what's wrong with closing the forest? The government's doing good.
And just the way their conception of role of government, like we're like the young people, they weren't just the ideological subversion cannot be understated. They were presented with very viable Marxist framings in everything. Like, I mean, the way they think of everything is through that kind of lens. So, and the fact that the atheism, like once you dismiss with God as a conceptual centralizing ethic, it's got to go somewhere. So it goes to the government. So naturally, they kind of their conception of government is they should have these like crazy powers. And we're people that weren't inundated with that kind of conditioning, that Marxist conditioning. I mean, it's terrifying to me. Like I just see more control.
I did an interview with Daniel Tyree. He's not even that young. He's 28, I believe, 29, former national executive of the PPC. He's created the Dominion Society. And I asked him a question, and I feel like I might have offended him unintentionally. I asked him, do you know what freedom is? Like, my point was not that he's stupid. I'm like, have you even ever tasted freedom? I'm trying to understand this newer generation. Food supply, for example. I remember a time when my mom used to jar and pickle. Like most of the food came from my mother, either like from her or indirectly through the bazaar. And even then it was primary food sources like rice, parsley, but that role has been, sovereignty is being transferred from the family unit to someone else. That someone else is like McDonald's. McDonald's is $1 billion corporation. It might as well be the government at this point.
Yeah, I actually watched parts of that interview with you and Daniel. I had a lot of arguments with some of the post-liberal or pro-monarchy types when I was advocating for the 51st state. And it's funny, he mentioned one of the arguments I got. And it's famous because during the Confederation debates, Sir John A. Macdonald very much differentiated from what Canada was going to be with this American experiment. And that's why, because liberalism is bad to a lot of these thinkers. It's just the post-liberal sentiment, right? I don't think things are that black and white. I think we live in an extremely dynamic time politically. And I think we should be hesitant to put ourselves in these categories. Because I think in a lot of senses, that's how they're hurting us, is by playing us against one another and our own natural proclivities to lean certain ways politically. But yeah, and it's like, it was kind of like, well, what's so good about freedom? What is freedom anyway? And it's like, well, it's agency, it's sovereignty at an individual level to kind of determine things for yourself within reason. It's not that these things are indefinable. It's kind of the way you hear these arguments posed. And like, I like a lot of stuff the Dominion Society is doing, but there's things for me that are just incongruous with the way I interpret the world and politics. I couldn't join and advocate for kind of like this pro-monarchy stance, pro-Westminster Parliament sense of it. I really think we require reform. And that's like, but with that said, with all of the remigration stuff, I think that's very reasonable. I don't think they're racist. I'm not going to admonish them in any cheap way, but for me, and I'm being very fair with this, it's incongruous, some of the pro-monarchy, anti-liberal stuff. I don't think that's necessarily the way we should go.
So, first things, I wish him well in the Dominion Society.
Me too.
I'm gonna give my objective analysis of what's going on. On the right, forget the left. On the right, there's a split. You have people like Daniel Tyree who believe that we need a strong government to act as a sort of an immune system. So to push back against the UN, to push back against China, and to push back against the US. And to him, Daniel Tyree, the monarchy represents that. So that is the monarch is our head of state. The other side are the pro-Republicans, a pro-Republic sort of faction. They support the Alberta separation, and they believe in, more individual liberties. I won't say where I land, but that's how I see the two sides.
I think that's super accurate. And again, how I said, I'm very hesitant. I'm not just hesitant. I actually proactively endeavor to not jump on ship with people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I really try to just be very vigilant and diligent before I identify myself as one group or another, because I think they both make very relevant points. And I think what we require, say one is a thesis and one is the antithesis. We require a synthesis there. We need something kind of in the middle of that, because there's valid points on all sides. And it's like I said, what I'm noticing lately is that this very proclivity that we all have. So we're all essentially, you're temperamentally predisposed. Let's go back further than that. You're genetically predisposed to a certain temperament. And then you're temperamentally predisposed to having certain ways, and it's relative to your personality. So people that are high in openness and creativity have a tendency to lean left, and people high in conscientiousness and orderliness, they tend to lean right. So I think we can't really escape that. But I think the people that rule us, the ruling class, the elites, the globalists, however you want to phrase that, I think they're profoundly aware of our proclivity to go these ways. And I think that's utilized against us. And again, you say that kind of like a synthetic Hegelian dialectic, or even more simplistically, like a controlled opposition scenario. You have one dog that's so bad and scary that he scares the herd, the electorate, over to the other dog. He's going to protect them from this scary dog. And then that dog invariably scares them back. So despite this apparent back and forth, the trajectory never changes. And it's exactly where the true ruling class, the true elitists, want us to go. And I think that's like one of the biggest secrets of ruling masses of people, is to play us off against one another. That's my own personal theory, sort of.
Okay, so if you want to explore this, if you want to look at the actual battle that's being waged, not the one where we lowly people are fighting left versus right.
That's right.
I think it's national elites versus global elites. So in Canada, I don't think we even have national elites. Like our Laurentian elites have completely sold out to Europe. But in the US, you see it now. The national elites have won out. So it doesn't mean that Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, these people are angels, but they're nationalists. They believe in America. They think that money in America should be used for America. Maybe not Americans, but America. Same things happen in Russia. Same things happen in China. That's kind of what we're trying to do here in Canada with this Alberta independence movement. It's a glimmer of hope. The trucker convoy was a glimmer of hope of bringing back nationalism, but like that's the battle I see being fought high above, and meanwhile we're worried about forest fires down here.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. I mean, again, I always say this, but it's frequently the case that it could be more than one thing at once. I think that's a major dynamic of it, for sure. But you're seeing this thing happen more broadly on the right, and it's this fracturing. This more like in America, you're seeing it the more pro MAGA, pro populist versus the pro Israel style neocon type, and that dialectic is very hard right now. And like, there's so many, like, if you're following any of the Fuentes Tucker Carlson debacle, like, dude, that blows my mind. Like, you're watching it and you're just what I'm determining is I don't trust any of them. I think is very likely that what Nick laid out is Tucker probably is tied to the CIA. I think most people are at that level, the whole Project Mockingbird thing with the media. But I also think that this Nick Fuentes character is very likely controlled as well. Why would I think that? Well, how would I, if I was this group and I wanted to create people for this controlled opposition operation, I would have them on the periphery, and I would keep them on the periphery, and I would almost make them be perceived as ostracized. So Nick Fuentes was debanked. He was deboosted from everything. He was this, everyone was presenting him in this very unflattering way, to say the least. And then when I needed him, I would start to give him a little attention. So it's just coincidental to me that now suddenly he's being propped up a little bit. I just think that's how they stay ahead of these narratives. And maybe I'm paranoid, or maybe I'm fucking calling it spot on. But like, what I'm saying is that most of this ecosystem is synthetic. I've been saying it since we first met. Like, I feel like it's kayfabe. I feel like I'm watching the WWE, and everything is just another aspect of this narrative. And there's so many moves ahead that you just can't get any kind of insight on it, right? You're just, it's more convoluting your conceptions of it.
Yeah, regarding the split on the right, in a way, it's a good thing. So you, JP, you have, a brain and you use it and you're discerning, and you say you don't fully trust anyone. It makes it harder for things to get done if you don't blindly trust a leader. But
Mhm.
in the end, wherever you get to, you're a much better person and you've made much better decisions, as opposed to other people who just listen to the CBC or whatever Greta Thunberg told them.
Yeah, it's just the psyops, man. I keep saying this line, like, I have psyop fatigue. I think everyone does in this climate. And for me, it's like I say, we're watching this system that we all thought was above board, and we're all kind of learning at the same time that, oh, maybe it's not. And for some of us, their instinct is to just not look at it. I can't look at that. You know what I mean? And then for people like me, I cannot look away. I'm just absorbed by this. Like, well, so nothing's real. Like, even like the discourse involving all of this stuff is synthetic and it's contrived, and it's just has the whole intention of hurting humanity. It's pretty disconcerting, to say the least.
Yeah, it's the problem. I mentioned this during the election. A lot of people, they told me, they're like, Payman, don't trust this guy. Payman, this guy's a federal agent. This guy is CSIS. And citizens, civilians, we're not very good at playing these spy games. Like, we're good at building buildings or growing food or whatever it is we do, developing software. But I can't go through life if I have to assume that every single person is an undercover agent. Like, it can't work that way.
Yeah, 100%. You have to kind of just commit to the game in your own life and like take everything kind of at face value, or you can't exist. You'll absolutely lose your mind. And I've said this before, when I started to understand, you got to think 2 years ago, I was on X supporting Pierre Poilievre. And I just thought, like, yeah, the government got a little crazy. We need to vote a conservative in there and everything's going to be fine. And I just started going deeper and deeper and deeper into these rabbit holes. And I realized that on some level it was pretty scary. And it's like, when I'm hypothesizing about potentially what could be occurring behind the scenes, I would remind my friends and family, hey guys, because I know what I sound like. I sound like I'm fucking nuts. I say, like, hey guys, just I'm tethered to reality. I'm not, getting delusional here, but I think these are very plausible models for what might be occurring, kind of thing. It's like, so I would take a very proactive kind of precaution in order to keep myself grounded. And I do that with my religious beliefs too, because at the end of the day, I have that, and that supersedes everything, my belief in my faith. So, I mean, that kind of allows me to be able to maybe go a little farther in some of the conjecture that I'm offering to figure this out. But scary stuff, man.
I yesterday, a couple of days ago, you heard about the BC Supreme Court ruling giving all that land
I
enrichment to
did.
the First
That's
Nations.
absolutely crazy to me. I can't believe that.
So it's 1,800 acres, principally the federal crown, so the federal government, and there's also some airport, city of Richmond, some private corporations, and then private people. So 200 people privately could potentially have their land taken. I say could because the First Nations tribe came out and they said, "Oh, we're not gonna expropriate the land of the people who privately own it." I was going to pick up the phone and call my dad and tell him, "See, like I've been telling you, there's no rule of law here. Maybe consider selling your land here and buying something somewhere else." Then I was like, you know what? It might be just a waste of my time. Like it's still not enough for him to believe me.
Yeah, and that's the situation we're in. The people that are still kind of have faith in it, and I don't have any animus towards them. There's a lot of people that are younger than me that don't go online. Of course, they believe the CBC is journalism. Why wouldn't you? They've not had anything to really kind of conclusively convince them otherwise. So I mean, I feel bad for these people. Even like I say, that old liberal boomer in the famous meme that was given and is kind of used to then foment this generational divide in Canada. And it's just like, man, we're all just we're just all in this very, very corrupt system, and we're all blaming each other in so many different ways, almost on every available metric. We're tribalizing and categorizing each other, and we're blaming each other. And it's like we were very close to realizing that in many ways. Like I was starting to say, like every day, more and more people are waking up until it's inevitably going to reach this tipping point. And we'll kind of realize, okay, and we got to make some changes. That was a very optimistic kind of hypothesis I had. But now it's like we were stopped dead in our tracks with this new narrative they throw up, this new climate change lockdown thing. And like, I can't help but argue this because I'm affected by it. I was on vacation in Cape Breton when this was announced. Like I had plans that this affected directly. And I mean, to be honest with you, man, I definitely couldn't just throw caution to the wind and go. Now I will do it in an activist regard. I'll go and do the same thing. But for me to just kind of like accommodate that risk for me, it would decimate me if that happened, right? Like I'm not in good financial shape to take a risk like that. And that's what we were kind of talking about. No one is. Canadians have never been more broke. A $25,000 expenditure is a good disincentive. You know what I mean? Like it's so the efficacy of it is just fucking just it's very, very troubling, man. It makes me the only adjective I can come up with, it makes me feel this nauseous feeling, but it's not a true physical reaction. It's like I feel like my soul is nauseous by watching the repression and watching people make arguments for the tyranny and hate me because I'm opposed to it. It's just like, oh, we're fucked. You get to a point where you're almost like, okay, I just want the money to move away from all you people and live the last of my days out.
Yeah, just take the you take the blue pill and you go back to eating the steak.
That's right. I could like a steak, man. I take one. Can't afford it. So
You think you can't afford it now? Wait until you have to pay 25 G's.
and that's honestly that's the premise of all of this. It's like I say this a lot, but it can't not be said enough because people don't understand what these restrictions represent, and the whole premise of carbon being this death thing. Like your carbon emissions that's the reason why you're going to not live your life. But what this is accomplishing is this gradual reduction in our quality of life. Like more and more, we're not able to do the things we want because we can't afford to. That's kind of the underlying premise of like this neo-Malthusian environmentalism. They want us all to get used to having shitty lives and not doing things because, and again, it's the slow acclimation. If this came overnight, people would revolt. So it's the frog being slow boiled in the pot. And I think we're seeing that broadly right across the Western world. And it's scary because it seems to be working for them.
Remember, I gave you that perspective, the conversation I was having with the orthodontist negative feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
So I said that you're paying taxes to fund this bureaucracy, which makes it impossible for you to work. So there's no industry, but that's why you need. There's like another dimension to that now. You're paying these taxes so that there's no private industry. You have to have public sector, but then that public sector turns around and further hurts private industry through carbon taxes and carbon emission caps. Like they're attacking this system. They're burning the candle from like 8 different ends.
Yeah, and right away I remember this is like a colloquialism. This isn't mine, but it's kind of the that negative feedback loop, or some people call it a positive feedback loop for socialism, and that's socialist policies create a problem economically. Socialists externalize culpability, they blame capitalism, and then their solution for this is more socialism. And it just goes and goes until we get to the point where it's unsustainable, and then the country either collapses, goes bankrupt, or something then is reset. And I think that's where Canada, and like you've mentioned, Europe, Europe is in the same spot. Like we're just indebted, and it's to the point now where I know in Canada, like I said, it's 42 to 43% of your labor goes directly to the government that is incapable of providing you any services. And their answer for this, considering they don't have the forest management capabilities nor the firefighting capabilities, their answer, their solution for this is we'll just lock you down. And you have to be cool with that. Right. Like, and people just don't get it. Again, it's like you lay all these arguments out as carefully and patiently as you can muster, and they will look at you and say, yeah, but it's really dry. And you just stand back and you're just like, it's where we are.
It's the system. It's so big and it's so convoluted. Think of the world's biggest forest with, kilometer high trees. Nobody can see the forest from the trees.
Mhm.
That's the
Perfect
problem that we're
comparison.
having. So when you try to have a rational conversation with somebody about this forest fire ban, like how are you going to talk about, the legacy of the British Empire and, the debt, the fiat banking system and Malthusianism? They're just like, what are you talking about? The tree is dry. I can see it. It's dry.
That's right. And that's kind of where I get, and I hate to use this term because it sounds like it's coming from like an arrogant place, but low resolution. And that's what I just mean, people that don't necessarily have the not even capability. Some people it's just directly tied with their curiosity. But like I can't help but try to analyze things and figure out how they work. It's just a nature, it's part of my nature. But a lot of people aren't wired like that. So they have just this acceptance and they think of things in a very one-dimensional regard. So I just think low resolution. Like I see a higher resolution kind of interpretation of things, and they're very low resolution, and that's where the danger comes in. And like I said, when we've kind of touched upon this topic before, I don't think we're low resolution organically. I think that we've been conditioned to be more susceptible to a lot of these Marxist framings, and I think that's kind of what's happening. And what people don't realize about Marxism, especially people that advocate for it, is that it's not Marx. What you do is you consolidate wealth and power in one centralizing force, and that's what we see time and time again. It's never the utopia, and it's very almost identical to fascism. Like, and that's why the contemporary version of communism, James Lindsay, who you were talking about, it references a lot. It's more like Dengism. It's communism 2.0 is the term he uses, but it's a hybridized version of communism and fascism, and he's spot on that. There's definitely some things I don't necessarily entirely line up with him on, but regarding that, I entirely agree with that. I also agree with his conception that it's more kind of interpreted as a religion, like a Gnostic religion, where it's based on resentment and kind of creating this utopia from reality. There's a disdain in this ethos for this thought pattern. But regardless, it's pretty crazy, man. Here I am in Nova Scotia. I'm living amongst a bunch of people that absolutely feel it's right of the government to do this, and that I'm crazy. And it's like I say, every day I wake up and I live, and it's like my life, I'm in an episode of Black Mirror or something. It's like I'm seeing a different reality than they're seeing, and it's getting a little much, man. I'm thinking of trying to maybe raise some capital and get out of here. Like really, like go to Alberta
No,
because it's scary.
nobody would blame you, man. Well, I wouldn't. Uh, I was listening to this speaker. She's a property rights advocate, and she said, quoting her father, "You either own property or you are property." And she
Mhm.
said specifically the reason she said that is someone's going to own that property. It's a,
That's good.
the way that they've sold this. They make it seem like if you have public land, we call it crown land in Canada,
Mhm.
that nobody owns it. Everyone owns it. Like it's just
Yeah,
God owns it essentially. I look at the government or the crown, think of it as a person, a corporation, but a person.
that's an
So they own that land. So when they say you can't go hiking on that land, essentially that would be like you, if you own a house, you have a backyard, saying, Payman, you can't come into my backyard.
Mm,
That's the way they view this. And when they say, when the left, I'm talking about the left, but the pro government people, they say, government, essentially you don't have rights, you have permissions. Government gives you permission to go on the crown land. They view that crown land as the private property of the government. So that's why they have the right to give you the permission to go on and revoke that permission.
yeah, 100%. And they don't think there's anything wrong with that. And they don't feel that it's a conflict of interest with their own agency. And that's what I mean. Like people aren't just, they're not just letting this happen, they're wanting it. We've been conditioned to desire this. A lot of us think it's good. And it's again, it's not because they've done research on socialism. It's not because they've actually figured out like economically how it works. It's because they were sold a bunch of false utopian ideals. And it makes sense. And again, I've mentioned this before, but with young people, these Marxist framings, they appeal to an inherent capacity for pseudo moralistic behavior. Like when you're young, you want to make shit better. We all rebelled in our teens, and we all seen those groups of rebellious kind of punk rock, fuck the system, whatever it is. But there's that pseudo moralistic aspect that's a big part of Western culture for youth. And this appeals to that entirely. And it gets them pushing things that are ultimately to their detriment. And like, again, man, we've been conditioned for this. It's ideological subversion. And where does it go from here? Like that's the biggest theme of this. Like, where do we go from here? We either repeal this, we either realize that if there's going to be solidarity on anything, it's the power of the government. We can't let them have this much power. And we start to take pragmatic, peaceful, very peaceful. Did you hear that? Very peaceful measures to
Sorry, what was that? Violent?
back against it. Yeah, don't even say that, bro. They'll fucking come right in. But it's crazy, man.
Right at the beginning of your comments, you said that they don't realize that they're giving up their own agency. What I thought of immediately when you said that was a slave plantation. So imagine like your stereotypical slave plantation in the South. Somebody comes into their property and they're like, and the slaves are the ones that are defending their master. They're like, this is his land. You don't have a right to come in here. That's what a Canadian citizens that advocate for the government stripping them of their rights. That's what they look like to me.
100%. I use this phrase a lot. They're actively participating in their own subjugation, and they're too ignorant to realize it. That's what they're doing. And that's very scary. And like I said, the only thing I think to pragmatically approach this with a resolution in mind is education, information. And that's why it's never been more important to try to inform people. And I mean, you can't be right. I'm not saying everyone has to get out and make a podcast and start trying to talk about this. But I mean, if you do understand this and you do kind of see what's occurring and you're starting to become aware of this broader process that's being utilized for our detriment, our net detriment, then I mean, yeah, you should start trying to explain to people. It's like I said, instead of the left and right saying like, I'm right, you know what I mean? Like I believe in these ideals, and the left person countering and saying, I'm right. It's like, maybe we should convince each other that we're watching different movies. We'll never convince the left that you know what I mean? Like these are natural functions of humanity. But what we should convince each other of is we can have some unity without ideological uniformity. Not on everything. There's very polarizing issues, and these polarizing issues like the transgenderism stuff, that's always put up at the forefront. So we fall into these patterns of arguing with one another, right? And it's just, I'm starting to see it more and more. And I'm not the only one that sees this, this way we're heard it relative to the right left political dichotomy. They utilize that to play us against one another while they control the trajectory we're going.
And they're very good at it. What they do, they act in an ungodly manner in such a way that you and I can't resist getting emotionally involved. Now I'm talking about Tamara Leach, Artur Pawlowski. If they do something unethical to Jeff Evely, that'll be another one where you and I might lose our objectivity.
And this is what I said initially. It's like what they want to do, like they don't want to have to dedicate all kinds of resources into the enforcement mechanism for this society. What they want to do is like Confucian. They want to like terrorize us by like being very harsh. It's like, and then scaring the masses. So they want to make massive examples and ruin these people's lives with heavy fines, heavy imprisonment, social ostracization. You know, the way the media covers them as if they're racist, right-wing lunatics. Like, all of this thing is to make all of us be disincentivized to speaking against the regime. And it's like I frequently say, and this might be a good closing note for the show. It's like, you must not be demoralized. We must be emboldened. And the further they go, we have to have more resolve, or we're losing. And if we're losing, you know, it's I don't think a lot of people realize what we're losing. And I don't think once we lose it, it's likely we will be able to get it back. And that is our agency.
Yeah. It's very, we have to make a stand now, and we need to make coherent arguments. And as you mentioned, we have to educate ourselves that we can no longer afford to just treat these as one-off battles. You know, like a little COVID here, maybe another Jeff Ebley there. We need a overarching narrative to say, you know, a vision for Canada is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that entirely. That's a good positive note to end on. Why don't you tell everyone where you could be found, Peyman?
You can find me on X at Peyman Askari 451. I have a podcast in lay terms. You can find me on YouTube, Rumble, Substack. I'm also on X. I do a live stream with Jason James every Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. behind the paywall, I believe. I do another one, Service at the Improv, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time Saturdays. And this Saturday, 6 p.m., I'm doing a live stream on RB Ham's podcast with Mr. Jeff Ebley. So check that one out, Beyond the Pale.
Awesome. Very awesome. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name's JP Berg. This is Dumb the Wiser. Cheers.